Hi, I'm Crystal.
And I'm Karin, and you're listening to the Rom-Com Detectives.
Okay, so welcome to Rom-Com Detectives, Episode 6, Love and Affection, the next episode in our Mentalist unit. Today, Karen and I will be talking about the fourth episode of the first season called Ladies in Red.
This episode originally aired on October 21st, 2008.
We're going to start with our case briefing. This case takes place in San Francisco. The title relevance, a lady in red is sometimes used to refer to a jilted lover or a woman of vanity. In this case, there are two ladies who could be the jilted lover, and we have to figure out which one it is, right? Thus, ladies in red instead of lady in red.
Oh, they went deep with that one. The victim and cause of death, Jason Sands, referred to as a big-ass political contributor, bled out after being tortured.
And the motive here was money and jealousy. Guest stars, there were several, but only really one that I thought was worth mentioning. I don't know how to say her last name. It's Angela Sarafian, but she's from Westworld. And it was funny because I knew I recognized her when I first saw the episode, but I couldn't remember what from. And so when I looked her up finally, when I was rewatching, I was like, "Oh, that's right, she was in Westworld." Jane's skills in the episode. So I put down pulse reading, but I'm not entirely sure that he does this. It kind of looked like he did, but we can talk about that later. And then his skills of observation in the early scene before the intro. He's good with children. Is Have we seen how good he is with kids before this?
I'm trying to remember. I think this is the first child we've encountered.
Yeah, young child. Yeah.
We also see one scene where he does what is called a Russian scam, but it's juggling items like he wants what someone else is holding, so he hands them something to get what they have.
I didn't know that's what it's called.
It's listed in the script. I couldn't find it online at
Ah.
all, but they detail it in the script.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, let's get into our episode breakdown. So the team is called in on a case of a missing big-time political contributor. The AG tells them to stay on top of it. So it starts off as a missing person, not as a murder. And then while they're walking into the house, Jane notices a toy on a table, and then the lead detective takes them to a room that's been tossed, and that's what leads them to believe that he's missing because there's like a blood stain on the floor. And then I don't know, Jane is like looking around the room, right? He's noticing things. There's a photo of Jason that's smashed, which I thought was kind of funny because do you have a picture of yourself in your office?
Um, no, actually, I don't.
When he saw that, I was like, wait, do people normally do that?
You're right. It's just a picture of him, not his family, just him.
I was like, that's a little vain. Maybe it's a politician thing.
Maybe the murderer brought it in just so he could say, "You see, this face, this is
I
you."
hate you. But yeah, so Jane's like, what is a good way to call it? He always upends things, right? By like there's like a normal scene of them investigating and talking things over, and he just says something that's so out there. And in this case, he says that Jason is still in the house, and they all just laugh at him, right? And
Mhm.
the detective, she says something strange. She finds out that, oh, he's a consultant, he's not an agent. And then she's like, oh, I heard of you, you're the psychic. And she says, sorry, Gandalf, but we did look pretty good on our own. And I was like, wait, is Gandalf psychic? Uh, I don't know, is he? I didn't think he was.
I made a note of that too, and I think it's really more to show that this detective is not a geek.
Yeah.
She doesn't know what she's talking about.
But then Jane says is there's no such thing as psychics line again. But then he explains what he's talking about. He shows him the chair is overturned and that's what he was being held in, and he shows the passcode, like there's like a little box on the floor with like numbers on it. And then he had noticed a piece of paper that was stuck under a bookcase, so he asked the detective to pick it up and she tries and it just rips. And so that's when they figure out that there's a safe room in the room somewhere. So and then they're talking about bringing in someone to crack the code, but he's like looking at like I think there was like a picture of a sailboat when he first came in the house too. But he notices another one on the wall. So two pictures tells him that that's something of importance. So I guess he uses the numbers on the sails, and I don't know. They don't really show. He's entering a bunch of numbers constantly, right?
Yeah, he says he's trying the top 10 common passwords, passcodes.
Yeah, yeah. I think he uses the numbers on the sail, and then that eventually works, and they find him dead inside. So when we did the episode about when we did Red Hair and Silver Tape, I was like, I don't think the team attends very many funerals, but then here they are attending another funeral. Oops. But yeah, so they're at his funeral trying to, I guess, look for his killer.
Yeah, see if anyone's
And
suspicious.
yeah, and then so when Jane asks about the wife's alibi, Lisbon says that she was at a play called Peter and the Wolf with her daughter. And then Lisbon leaves and she leaves all the guys there. And then it, as Van Pelt is walking away, Rigsby like groans and he's like, Van Pelt, you're killing me. He's so unsubtle. But this leads to like a really good Cho burn. It was one of my favorite lines in I think season one. And because Jane asks Rigsby if he's told her how he feels, and Cho just says no, he just stares at her at the back of her neck for several hours. Women love that. It's his delivery, right? It's like
Oh, I love it.
but yeah, so then Jane tells Rigsby that women just want love and affection. And so they bet, and Rigsby thinks he's being really funny by choosing the widow. But then Jane goes to approach her and he's like, no, no, wait.
Yes, so the bet is that Jane can seduce any woman at the funeral, and Rigsby chooses the widow.
I thought it was funny their little interaction too when he's like, "Well, then why don't you have a a bunch of women following you around?" He's like, "Why would I want a
Why would
bunch
I
of
want
women?"
that?
Which is funny because he told Simon Baker totally must have women following him around everywhere. Did you notice Jane's vest in this episode? This is something that I don't think I've noticed before. He had his top button on his vest unbuttoned, and he had that for every single vest that he wore. He wore like a kind of wrinkled light gray vest in the funeral scene, and then later on he's like wearing a like I think a navy blue one and then a darker one. And they all have the top button unbuttoned. Do you know what if that means anything?
I don't. I have not had those astute powers of observation. I noticed
I
the color because he wore lighter colors earlier in the show and then
mhm.
transitioned to darker. But yeah, it's a button situation.
I tried Googling it, and I guess like it's more common for men to wear the bottom button unbuttoned so that they can move around more, like, because the vest is down like low
Yeah,
near the pants, so it kind of flares out a little. But he wears his top one unbuttoned. So, yeah, I was wondering what that means. Maybe somebody can clue us in. Okay, so this is the part where I thought maybe he did a pulse reading because he goes straight up to Jennifer. He shakes Jennifer's hand, but he doesn't let go of her hand. And so he's holding her hand with two hands, right?
yeah, I
Or
think
is it
so.
just one? But yeah, so I this is typically what he does when he does pulse readings. He'll shake somebody's hand and then he'll put his other hand on their wrist. And then that's why I thought maybe that was his pulse reading thing. But they don't really like put a lot of attention on it like they do later on. But Rigsby seems to think that he's won the bet because which is like indicative of Rigsby's lack of understanding. I
Yes, I
don't think
really can seduce someone in 5 minutes. That's Jane's superpower.
okay, so they go back to CBI And I do want to note that they start teleporting here because I looked it up and I guess 'cause
Oh, yeah.
San Francisco and Sacramento are both major cities. So they're not like right next to each other or anything. So it's like 2.5 hours to drive between the two places. And it doesn't even take into account where in the city you're going. So it's not like a small trip or anything. But yeah, so back at the office, Manila is embarrassed because the lawyer at the funeral that Jane brushed off made an official complaint to the AG. And so, I don't know, he's like scolding them in the break room, right? I really like this scene
Yeah, it's so great.
because it's basically like two kids getting busted by dad, right? And I guess that kind of feeds into the sibling thing. It was still cute though. And he says, I let you make Lisbon's life a misery, but he also admits that he closes cases like a crazy person. So that's why he's basically saying that that's why he puts up with him.
Yes, and I love Lisbon's little, "Yep, he does make my life a misery, yep." She just takes it all in stride.
But yeah, going back to the dad and the two kids thing, like Lisbon tries to walk off and he's like, wait.
Yeah.
He's totally like their dad. But then Vanelli gets a call and says that they'll drop the complaint if he goes and talks to the widow in person at her house. Which they all look at each other like, hey, what does that mean?
Yep, and Jane's just like, "Alright, I shall go continue seducing the widow now. Thanks, guys."
I will go drive 3 hours back to San Francisco. Oh boy.
Oh,
They go back and forth so much. Oh my
they do.
god. But yeah, so Jane goes back to the house and he gets invited by their little daughter Julie to go meet her dolls and everything. She's got like a different name for each of them.
So
And
precious.
yeah, she's cute. But this is where they first show how good Jane is with kids, especially little kids. He really knows how to talk to them. Like he jokes around making up bad names for the one that she was going to introduce him to. And but then Jennifer comes to get him, and then she basically reveals that she just used the apology as like a way to get him to come to see her because he had offered her help. And so this was her calling him for help. And she reveals that she found out that and the reason she was upset at the funeral was that the lawyer Bennett had told her that they're broke and they're in debt and they're gonna have to sell their house, which is I don't know. She was probably lying here because why would you tell a widow that at a funeral?
Yeah. I was also wondering, like, if their house is that big of an asset, wouldn't it cover a lot of her debts just to downsize?
I don't know. Rich people live on a different level.
That's true, that's true.
Who knows how much money he had, or how much debt he had. But yeah.
But she expects Jane to be able to find money that her husband must have hid it somewhere.
Yeah. And she does this because she knows that he found the hidden room.
Right.
So there's a little scene after this that it's not really important, but I thought it was amusing because it shows like Jane how he like bluffs and he can scare people off by just making crap up, right? The sheriff's department came to seize her assets. I don't know what they intended to do. I guess they were gonna just take everything. But then he steps in, he starts talking about lethal toxins and them needing shots, and there's anthrax poisoning. He like looks back at her like, oh, it's the wife poisoned the husband kind of thing. But she doesn't seem to mind, right?
No, it's a bizarre little scene because we never hear from them again. It's just this
Yeah.
one, like, they I don't know, you'd expect this to become more of, like, a reoccurring problem.
Yeah. Yeah. But so since Jane finds out this whole thing about their financial situation, that starts a team. He goes back to Sacramento once again back in the office. He must be flying. Do you think, or do you think he's driving?
Oh, yeah, they really don't specify at all.
Must be exhausting. Yeah, so they're going over the financials and they find out that there is a $10 million pension that he converted into cash. And then this part was interesting because while they're talking to Jane about that, Lisbon asks him, "Are you a little soft on her?" And he says, "Well, yeah, she's attractive and and so maybe a little bit." And she's very interested in this, right? She's like, "Did you say maybe a little?" She looks a little jealous.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, or not jealous exactly, but just like, "Oh, does he like her?"
And I wonder, I could talk about this for a long time about this aspect of Jane at this time,
Yeah,
but I feel like the team is just like, "Aw, Jane has a crush." Like, it all just
yeah.
feels very high school.
And I do wanna note that Cho smiles here. There's plenty Cho smiles in
Oh,
this
there's
episode.
so many. He just can't stop.
So Lisbon goes to talk to the lawyer, and then when she gets back, Van Pelt gives her a lead on a shell company that she found. She this is like this becomes Van Pelt's thing. She's good at digging through the financials and stuff like that, and computer stuff. But then when she wants to go with them, Lisbon says, "No, you're gonna stay here." And this becomes like a recurring thing that I usually felt bad about for Grace because it just felt like Lisbon was always like, "No, stay here." Right?
Yeah, I agree, but I feel like in this one it becomes a bit of a yo-yo because she, like, lets Van Pelt in just, like, a little bit
Little
here
bit,
and there,
yeah.
or she'll come along for other things, but not for this.
She does get to go out later, though.
A little, yeah.
So Grace's lead sends him to an address, which turns out to be a marina, and then they find an expensive yacht, and then they go on board, and then that's where a young woman pulls a gun on Jane, and she gives up as soon as she sees that they're actually cops, and then Cho handcuffs her, and then she claims that she is Jason Sand's fiance, and then they take her back. I don't know where this marina was, but they take her back to the office and then they start interrogating her. And then here, like, she starts getting a little intense, and Lisbon just like she like touches her and she sends her out. So
Yeah,
I don't
yeah, they
know.
let Van Pelt interrogate her for, like, 2 seconds.
Yeah. I guess that's just to like, I guess maybe reestablish that Van Pelt is the junior among them. I don't know. But they're trying to intimidate her, but she's not having it because I guess she's like a tough lady from she was in a detention camp when she was a kid and stuff like that. And she mentions this is the first mention of $10 million in diamonds that he had bought and then hidden. And so that's what she was looking for. But then when she mentions that they were going to leave with Julie, the little girl, Jane is really interested in this. And he's like, "Oh, you're going to take her with you." And I mean, like looking on the surface, I mean, you can understand why he's surprised because the girl Adriana, she looks really young, and she says she's a model and a dancer, and she doesn't seem like the motherly type. Like she just
Mhm.
looks like I don't know. I thought they cast her well. They cast someone who kind of looks like a I don't know, like an influencer. She doesn't. In contrast to Jennifer, who looks very like well put together, mommy type, right?
Mhm. And Adriana's extremely blunt
Yeah, yeah.
and abrasive, but yeah, so when she says she's gonna take the girl and says they got along great, then it changes the whole situation.
I thought it was funny because when Lisbon sends Van Pelt out, Jane comes in and she says, "Ah, the handsome one, gay, yes." He found this very amusing. Yeah, that was
Jane was
funny.
yeah, he was so amused.
But so she gives him names of two people that he was cleaning money for, and then they let her go. But as she's leaving, Jane goes and asks again about the girl, like, "Oh, were you really going to take her with you?" And that's when Adriana tells him that the wife, Jennifer, she was only pretending to love Julie, and that Adriana and Julie are actually good friends and she loves her. So I think this is around when Jane starts to um when his suspicion of the widow starts to solidify because like you said it changes the dynamic, right?
Yep, and also to note that the widow employs a nanny, so it's not like
Yeah,
she has
yeah,
full time with her daughter.
yeah. So Jane goes back to the house once again, going back to San Francisco. And he asks her a question about the play. And when she answers, he kind of just like brushes it off. But this becomes important later because this is actually how he like fully knows that it's her. But then as the team closes in on Dieter, he goes inside to talk to her about the diamonds and she tries to seduce him or not seduce him, but she tries to like cement like her hold on him because she knows that she can sense that he's attracted to her. And but I thought this scene was a little weird. She's like, "Can you
Yeah,
hold me? I just need someone to hold me." Like, does anyone talk like that?
it is so awkward. Also because Jane is sitting down at this point and she's standing up, and
Yeah.
she doesn't move towards him, though. She's just like, "I need you to hold me. Will you hold me?" And then
And
neither of them move.
I I guess maybe it was intentional because it was meant to be, like, over the top and, like, he doesn't fall for it, right? He doesn't hold her. He's just like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't." Which I was very relieved by because, like, they're kinda teasing the whole, like, Jane is, like, falling for her kinda thing,
Right.
and I was just like, "Eh."
Yeah, but then you wonder, why is he saying he can't? Is it because of professional, or is it that he doesn't really wanna go that far? Or yeah, it's like, why does he make that distinction that he can't?
Maybe it's just, "You murdered your husband. Ew, don't touch me."
Right.
Okay, so back in okay, I didn't look this up. Where is Oakland in compared to these 2 places?
Okay, so Oakland is a suburb of San Francisco. It's farther
Oh,
inland.
okay. Okay. But yeah, so in Oakland, they're waiting for the 2 guys that Adriana had pointed them to, but then as they apprehend them, Rigsby gets distracted by a mother and kids, and the suspect runs and he has to chase them down. But then later, Lisbon, Jane, and Minley are watching Cho as he interrogates one of those guys, and he claims that they didn't kill him, that they didn't even know that they claim that he didn't even steal any money from them, and he points them back to Adriana. But then right then after that, Jennifer calls Jane and says that her daughter's missing and there's a ransom note that was left. And then they go through this whole thing and eventually they bring her they cuz like Jennifer was in the CBI office. So they bring her from San Francisco all the
Yeah.
way back to Sacramento, and then I don't oh god, like I said, there's so much back and forth. It makes you wonder, like, why do they even bother making the case in San
Oh
Francisco?
my
Like,
goodness. I wonder this so many times throughout
what's
the
wrong with
show.
just making it in Sacramento, right?
I mean, I know part of it is because they built this nice set that is the CPI building,
Yeah.
and it has everything they need, but, oh,
Yeah, I don't know, it's weird. But yeah, so they're like Van Pelt is like I thought it was funny that she's like, "The kidnapper just IM Jennifer's cell phone," and I was like, "Did we call them IMs back then? Weren't they always called texts?" That was strange. But Jane, declares, "Oh, he knows where the money is," and then he takes off. And I think it's important here that he says, "I know where the money is," because this comes back as a little detail later. So Jane goes back to San Francisco again to help with the money exchange, but Adriana is the one who shows up and she points a gun at him and demands it. And then he specifically asks her, did they demand money or diamonds? And she says that they demanded money. And I think this is what also tells him further that it's Jennifer because he had dropped in
mm,
front of her that it was money, that he knows where the money is. So he knows when Adriana gets this call that the person who's demanding it specifically knows that there or thinks that there's money, not diamonds. Because I don't think he's told her about the diamonds yet, right?
yeah, the wife doesn't
She
know.
she just knows that the account was converted into cash. So she still thinks it's just money, right?
Yeah, so it was Adriana who said it was
Yeah.
diamonds.
So this is where he does that swap you're talking about.
Yeah, so she has a phone and a gun, and Jane's holding a water bottle and a bag of what he says is diamonds. So
Yeah.
he offers her one of the items so that she gives him the gun and the phone, and since she ends up with no leverage and he can really, he's not endangered anymore.
I thought it was a really funny scene because all of a sudden, he's got the water and the diamonds, and all of a sudden she's got the water bottle in her hand
Yeah.
instead of the gun.
Yep. And she's like, "Wait a minute."
Wait, huh? It was one of those things where I had to go back and because I didn't know I when I first watched it, I was like, "Wait, how did that happen? How did he end up with the gun and the phone?" But it's one of those blink and you miss it kind of things.
Yep.
But then so Jane sends them the last number that called her phone, and so that's how they trace it to Bennett's house, and then Bennett must live in San Francisco. So the team goes all the way from Sacramento to San Francisco. They
Right.
burst they burst in and like everybody draws guns and it's like, oh my god, the girl Julie like just like comes down the stairs behind him. I was like, oh my god, like why didn't they just it just didn't seem like a good scene. And then yeah, they cut to outside and then like all kinds of gunshots are fired inside. And I thought maybe they cut to outside because they couldn't show that kind of violence on screen, but I don't know. At the same time, maybe they just didn't want to have to get into the logistics of how things degraded and how the kid managed to stay safe kind of thing. And it was just simpler to cut
Yep.
outside.
Yeah, it makes a little cliffhanger too for the commercial break.
Yeah. So then we go to Minelli who goes to San Francisco. He goes to the hospital and he asks Lisbon to explain it to him simply. And she says that Bennett did it, but he had an accomplice, and they're not sure if it was the wife, if it was the widow, or if it was the mistress. So that's what they need to figure out. And then she asked him if they get more complaints, does he have their back? And he like I don't know, he tries to like fool her. He's like, I expect
Yeah.
you to do what's right without dragging me into it, which kind of because we don't know Minelli very well at this point, so we're just like, oh, he's that kind of boss. He just wants to cover his ass. But then he turns it around and he says, of course I do. And I'm insulted that you even asked, which I liked because it's kind of like they flip it around. It's like, oh, okay, he's actually a nice boss.
Yeah, I think Manelli has some great lines in here that kind of defines the role of this team, of
Yeah.
the Lisbon's team, and how much leeway they have.
Yeah. So this next scene is one of the early times where Jane actually lets everybody in on the plan, right? And I think it's because he needs them because they're doing this from two different places because the team goes back to Sacramento while Jane stays in San Francisco. But actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. But before that, Jennifer arrives at the hospital, and even though like she had said that she had pretended to Jane that she didn't know about the mistress, as soon as she sees her, she says Adriana. So she knows her
Yep.
by name. So she was
Yep.
well aware.
Yep.
And I loved Adriana's line because Jennifer asked why she got out of jail so quickly. She says, I screw better lawyers than you. Great line. But yeah, so Cho and Van Pelt leave as they're squaring off, and then this is where Cho and Van Pelt have to like sell it, right? They have to drop all this info. They have to say, "Oh, what about that lady that Jane mentioned, Wendy?" And then they tell Jennifer that Bennett is actually doing well, whereas Lisbon had told Minelli that he's probably not going to make it. So they're lying here and they're trying to plant this thing. They're trying to steer Jennifer in a certain direction, or as has been said, they're not sure if it's Adriana or Jennifer. But I think he thinks that it's Jennifer, but he still leaves them in suspense, right?
You gotta have a good con.
Yeah. But then they go back to the storage room. And it's so cute because Van Pelt and Cho low five each other. Like, we killed it.
Yeah.
They go back to the waiting room and both the women are gone. So Lisbon calls Jane and they run to Julie's room, and you kind of expect to see the mom here with the little girl, but it's actually Adriana, and she's like hugging her and checking on her, and they're really friendly. And then you realize, oh, she was telling the truth. She is a
Mhm.
better mom than her actual mom.
It's so sweet.
Yeah. Okay, so at the house where Jane is, Jennifer is like going through the whole chest of dolls, and she's trying to find Wendy Sands, which was one of the special dolls, and that's why they name dropped the name Wendy. And so she thought, I don't know what she thought. Did she think there was $10 million in diamonds inside a troll?
I
Because troll dolls aren't troll dolls. Yeah, these dolls aren't very big, right?
no. Yeah, I don't know.
She's not thinking. She's just greedy.
Yes, maybe there was a clue on the doll.
Maybe. I hid it in here. But she tries to blame Bennett, and she kind of just she vacillates between, like, she drops her act completely and then she tries to, like, bring it back, and it kind of shows you just how duplicitous she is, right, in this scene.
Ugh.
She's a piece of work. But yeah, so that's where Jane reveals that she got the play question wrong, which means that her alibi didn't actually check out. And she, like, yells at him about how her own daughter prefers Adriana to her, but hello, that's your fault.
Yep, coulda worked on that.
But then they show a flashback, and Jennifer and Bennett did it together, and she asks where the diamonds are, and he reveals that it's in the chandelier, which I was confused about at first, because is it in the little bowl thing at the top of the chandelier? Because it showed that it shines. So
I
is it in,
think
'cause,
so, like, it could I mean, I would think that maybe he built it into the chandelier, but
yeah, like one of the gems
well,
things?
but yeah, then they show that little flash of
Sparkle.
sparkle.
Yeah. Yeah, so I wasn't sure what they meant, if the actual chandelier was made out of diamonds, or if it was, because $10 million, that's a lot of diamonds.
Yeah, and then the part of the flashback, the when Jane first went into the girl's room, she said that her dad made
Built
her
it.
room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's basically the end of the episode. They go outside and they talk a little bit, and Joe asks when he first suspected her, and he claims that it was at the funeral, which they don't believe, but who knows. But then Jane tells Rigsby to go for it with Van Pelt, and she comes over and she asks him what he's talking about. He says nothing, and that's the end of it. But so that leads us right into, like, our cold reading section. Like, what point do you think he actually cracked it? Because I mean, there's several points where it seems that he's trying to verify his suspicions, so you can just keep going
Mhm.
back and back. And
Yeah, there seems to be a light bulb moment when he's talking to the mistress and learns that she was planning to include the daughter, when they ran off, and after that, Jane tests the widow with about her alibi with that,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
so but then he later says it was at the funeral because no wife should glow at her husband's funeral.
Which is a pretty typical out there Jane statement. Okay, other observations. This is the first episode where we see Jane sitting on his couch, so it's the couch's first episode. Yay!
Woohoo!
And then also, for Lucifer fans, the house that Jason Sands lives in is the same house used in the season 3 finale of Lucifer. So when I first saw it, I was like, I know this house. And I was like, what is this from? And then I went and I was like, I think it's from Lucifer. There's a specific scene where that I remembered. And so I went back to the episode back then, and yeah, it's the same house. You can even, like, the lace curtains on the front door, those are exactly the same. So yeah. And then the outside of the house too, because they show the outside of the house in both of the in both shows. So neat little thing there. I really, this is something that I really like doing. I like spotting duplicate scene or settings that people are in different shows. I've noticed it a lot because even though The Mentalist takes place in Sacramento, they filmed it in Los Angeles mostly, with some scenes shot in Sacramento and San Francisco, but mostly they shot in LA. So that's why there's so much overlap with other shows filmed in LA. All right, hot reading. Karin will lead us on this one.
Yeah, so, looking at the script that's available online, I noted a few things. They have a description of Manelli, mid-50s, and it says, "Manelli must be damn good at his job because every other indicator says he shouldn't be." And they're talking about, like, how he dresses and how he presents himself.
Mm.
Um, just kind of he's not very well put together, which I thought was interesting. They note that during the scene where Manelli's dressing them down, they say Lisbon is a martyr to her authority figures. and Jane just lets Manelli roll off him like water.
He does have a good, strong personality, though, I thought.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think this is a really great, like, Manelli has some really great lines on this episode.
Yeah, yeah.
At the beginning, at the funeral, when Jane is watching the widow interact with the lawyer, he suggests that they might be having an affair in the script, which I think is interesting because they don't ever pick that back up, which is probably why they
Mm.
dropped it.
But they were, though? Or were they just trying to get the money together?
I think they were working together just to get the money. I don't think.
Oh, okay.
Now, I wouldn't put it past the
Yeah,
widow to have also been having an affair, but I don't
yeah.
think they specify.
I mean, yeah, they basically show that she has other ways of trying to get people to do what she wants just by making doe eyes at people, tilting her
Yeah.
head, hold me. I really need to be held. Oh my god. I bet you Bennett fell for that one.
Oh, I bet he did. Oh, let's see. In the script, there's a little bit more to the scene where Jane has just talked to the mistress at the CBI, and he puts on his coat and he starts to leave back to San Francisco again. When, when Rigsby asks him where he's going, the script notes that Jane considers lying, and he's
Ah.
embarrassed to say he's going to speak with the widow. And when Lisbon questions it, he says he wants to ask her about the mistress, like he is trying to keep it about the case.
Mm.
But in the script, Lisbon adds, "Hey, whatever, I'm not your mother
Or your girlfriend.
or your girlfriend." But I thought it was interesting later when Jane is in the car for the drop after the girl's been kidnapped. He's on the phone with the team, and Lisbon tells him, "Do your mind games and get out of there." And he
Mm.
says, "Don't worry, mom."
Ah.
So it's interesting that they took it out of one place and put it back in
Put it
another.
back in another. Yeah.
And the script also includes a flashback scene where Jane watches his wife and daughter play at the beach, and the girl draws something in the sand, and it's Red John's smiley face. And they juxtapose this. This would be right before he's watching the girl, Julie, play with her nanny at the house.
Yeah, I was wondering why Angela Ruskin Jane was credited on the IMDb page because I looked for her and I didn't see her, but I guess she must have been in this scene that. So I mean that must mean they filmed it though, right? If she's uncredited but listed here.
It's possible. Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't have the DVDs to check for the
Yeah.
any deleted scenes that they included, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Huh. Well, I have the DVDs so I can go check. But I thought that they put the whole most of the deleted scenes online. Maybe not. I'll go look. But
Yeah, I didn't check that.
huh, that's interesting. Okay, rewatch checklist. Just been moments. I mentioned that Lisbon seems a little bothered by Jane being soft on Jennifer. Thought that was cute. Favorite lines. I liked Cho's one about that's where he stares at the back of her neck for several hours. Women love that. Women do not, in fact, love that. Just throwing it out there. He's being sarcastic.
Oh. Oh, let's see. I put a bunch in here. One of my favorite lines was when Manelli says, "What were you thinking leaving Jane alone at an event like that?" And Lisbon says, "No excuses. I mistakenly treated him as a responsible adult."
Yeah, I love that because I mean that's kind of like the whole shtick between the two of them in the early seasons, right? She's like his keeper. She's the mom to his like wild child consultant.
One of my favorite visuals in this episode is when Manelli comes down to the hospital after the shooting and he comes out of the elevator and Lisbon greets him with this. He's holding out a cup of coffee in front of her, like no nonsense, just like, "This is for you." And he just,
Well, I mean, he's just driven from Sacramento,
that's
Karen.
right. He's,
It's a long drive.
he's earned that coffee.
All right, we'll be right back with our Memory Palace quiz. All right, we have a new Memory Palace quiz for you this week, and be sure to check out our Instagram because we're going to have a bonus question for you on Sunday. So check us out at Rom-Com Detectives. But the way this works is I will ask 5 questions of increasing difficulty about the episode we just discussed, and you and Karen will have 5 seconds to come up with the answer. So, first question: what kind of dolls does the daughter Julie like to play with?
They're trolls.
When did the Trolls movie come out? Because I feel like Trolls were like around when I was a kid, and then they
Yeah,
kind of
they
had like a
were.
resurgence.
They were, yeah.
Um, and then the Trolls movie came out. I've never really liked troll dolls myself, though.
No, this says 2016 for the
Ah,
first Trolls movie, so no, this was well before that.
yeah, yeah, like 8 years before. Oh. Okay, question 2. How much do Jane and Rigsby bet over seducing Jennifer?
$100.
Correct. Question 3. What type of coffee does Manelli drink? Regular or decaf?
Regular.
I I like still don't really understand Jane's
No.
solution that he gives to him, because basically when he's scolding them in the drink room, he starts complaining that somebody removed the labels of decaf and regular on the two coffee machines, or the two coffee carafes in the break room. And so Jane tells him to mix half and half and drink twice
Drink
as
twice as
much.
much. Why not just tell him to drink one of each, 1 cup
I
of
know.
each?
I know. I was really confused by that. I still don't understand it. Okay, question 4. Where is Adriana from?
They probably say specifically, um, the Baltic, Russia, somewhere around there.
She's from Armenia,
Armenia.
because when Dieter is talking about her, he says you should go check out that Armenian dancer or something like
Oh,
that.
sneaky.
Question 5. When Jane asks if the duck is a flute or a bassoon, what is the correct answer?
Oboe.
Oh, you got it. Very good. I thought I would trip you up by saying flute or bassoon and not giving you the actual right answer, but she passed. Okay, yeah. And again, check out our Instagram on Sunday for a bonus question. Any last thoughts? I actually really like this one, even though it's like a filler episode, like you mentioned. These are it was I like the case. I think I fell for her little act up until the end at the reveal, even though like on rewatch it seems pretty obvious that it was her just based on how
Yep.
Jane is acting. But
Yeah. I get lost on this one thinking about Jane's how they portray his interest in the widow. Like, how much of it is real? How much of it is just an act? When you're going through your first watch through, we don't really have anything established for how is he dating women? Does he, go on dates? Does he pursue women? We don't know any of that. But then as we go farther into this season, we know that he does not.
yeah.
So it reflects back on this episode. You wonder how much of it is just playing with Rigsby, how much is setting up that reveal for him. There's so much of it.
And like he tells her that he was falling for her for
Yeah,
her act too, right? And I guess that's where this deleted scene comes into play, because they probably had him thinking about her in a way that's romantic and yet also thinking about Angela, right? So
mhm,
because if he's
yeah,
that's like the recurring thing with Jane, is he always holds back on his own romantic moving on because he doesn't feel like he can, because he still hasn't avenged his wife and daughter. So,
right. So does this experience make him more cautious in the future?
mm, yeah, I kind of wish that we had been able to see that, because they would have explored a really complicated storyline that becomes really important later on. So, If you're enjoying Rom-Com Detectives, be sure to leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. For our Spotify listeners, you can leave us a comment for our question of the week and tell us what part of the chandelier did you think the diamonds were in. If you'd like to join additional conversations about The Mentalist, you can visit the Mentalist subreddit at reddit.com/r/The Mentalist, and you can join the Mentalist Bullpen Discord server linked in the sidebar. To contact me and Karin, email us at host@romcomdetectives.com, follow us on Instagram or threads at romcomdetectives, or leave us a voicemail or text message at 1-650-733-XOXO or 9696. This episode of Rom-Com Detectives was recorded on March 14, 2025. Rom-Com Detectives Mentalist Unit is co-hosted by Krista Watanabe and Karin Lubbers and is produced by Pico's House. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye.
Bye.